What do the Acolyte, Captain America, and the Little Mermaid all share in common? Besides all being Disney projects, these three were all bombarded with tens and thousands of reviews within hours of release, with some trashing the movie seemingly without having watched it. If you're wondering why, I think it has something to do with this.
Miss Marvel, another sort of woke comic book.
And swap in a female lead who's going to replace the old worn-out male lead. But she'll be better than him at everything, you know.
Since Donald J. Trump took office in 2017, there's been a large contingency of backlash from people who claim Hollywood has gone woke. To present the good faith version of the argument from such critics, Hollywood used to be a place that was primarily concerned with telling good stories, and regardless of whether they failed or succeeded, that was always their North Star. According to the critics of woke Hollywood, the film industry is ceasing to entertain because they don't care much about entertaining at all. They care about turning their nose up at us and preaching. In fact, they supposedly don't like us very much. They think they're superior to us.
So, it is perfectly clear at this point that Hollywood despises its own audience.
This discussion has been prominent in online fandom lately, in light of the new Star Wars show The Acolyte, which has drawn a lot of criticism for being too woke. In this video, we're going to be placing a large magnifying glass into the heart of Hollywood to gain some enlightenment as to whether there is any truth to the accusations that Hollywood has a secret agenda they want to exercise. Has Hollywood indeed gone woke? What does the word woke even mean when used in this context? When people accuse Hollywood of going woke, this usually means one of two things, or sometimes two of two things. We're going to take a look at the two arguments that critics of woke Hollywood propose, starting with this. For critics of woke Hollywood, the mere act of representing and including people of different races, sexual orientation, and religion is an agenda in and of itself. For these critics, it doesn't matter what the actual substance of your story is or whether your narrative is inherently political in nature. For such critics, the process of inclusion in itself is viewed as a highly political act. Don't believe me? Let's hear it from the critics of woke Hollywood themselves.
Number 1, main character has 2 mothers. Number 2, main Jedi characters are all black and Asian, no white men. And number 3, only speaking role for white men in first episode is prisoners on a prison ship.
Or how about the fact that The Critical Drinker, one of the most popular YouTube movie reviewers, made a video about the Miss Marvel show, the first Muslim superhero, titled How Not to Build a Hero. And maybe you're thinking, but Cinemike, what's to say that has anything to do with the fact he's Muslim? Maybe he just didn't like the show. Well, what if I told you he recorded and published that video in March of 2022? 3 months before the show even released. Not 3 months after, but before. It's clear that to a large contingency of the woke Hollywood critics, using predominantly white male-dominated spaces, such as Marvel and Star Wars, to represent people of different genders, religions, and nationalities is a problem. Yet the critics of woke Hollywood ignore the fact that the inclusion of different groups of people in franchises such as Star Wars, DC, and Marvel is a direct response to the historical exclusion of said groups. Did you know it wasn't until 2017 that Wonder Woman, one of the most famous and recognizable comic book characters, got her own theatrical release film? By that time, Superman had already received 7 films, whereas Batman had been a title character in 8. And if your instinct is to argue that Batman and Superman are much more popular characters, you'd have to do 2 things. First of all, you'd have to make a case for Batman being 8 times more popular than Wonder Woman, and then you'd have to explain why characters the likes of Green Lantern received a film before Wonder Woman even did. If you go over to take a look at Marvel, their first 17 films all featured a white male lead in the most prominent role. Despite white men only making up 31% of the American population, they made up 100% of the prominent lead roles in Marvel's first 17 movies, which is the type of disproportionate representation you would expect someone like a Ben Shapiro or a Matt Walsh to complain about. Despite being one of the most popular characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Black Widow did not receive her own film until 24 films into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, at which point she was already killed off in an earlier film. Does it make any sense that frickin' Ant-Man got his own movie 6 years before Black Widow did? Or does that sound like the type of thing the critical drinker would label an agenda-motivated decision if Black Widow was a man and Ant-Man were Ant-Woman? We know that former Disney boss Ike Perlmutter actively encouraged the studio to steer away from female-led films such as Black Widow, citing movies such as Catwoman as a testament to why female-led superhero films can't succeed. Yeah, cause that was the problem with that movie. So the question I pose to critics of woke Hollywood is this: if the process of inclusion is considered a political agenda-motivated act, why was the blatant process of exclusion not considered a bad faith politically motivated act? Though to be fair, perhaps the mere inclusion of people of different races, gender, sexual orientation, and religions isn't a problem for all critics of woke Hollywood. So let's take a look at the other argument against woke Hollywood and see if that one holds up any better. Many have argued that Hollywood has become overly political because of their over-focus on political messaging.
And many of them openly admitted they inserted social justice messages into their shows.
The argument here is that Hollywood should focus on providing solid entertainment instead of spreading political messaging. These are the type of people who will accuse the acolyte of being too woke because of how it uses the Jedi and the Force as a metaphor for colonization. They'll point to this and say, see, Disney is making everything political. Why can't we just have entertainment? And to those people, I would like to say, point me to a time where everything wasn't political. George Lucas, creator of Star Wars and one of the most left-wing people in Hollywood, has not made any secret of the political nature of the earlier Star Wars films, discussing how the first few Star Wars movies featured anti-authoritarian messages, commenting on the Vietnam War.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
Storytelling has always been a vessel for communicating ideas, and Hollywood has never been an exception to that. One could argue that through the character of Brooks in The Shawshank Redemption, the film explores how the prison system can destroy an individual and make it near impossible for them to readapt to society. If that film were to be released today, you can imagine critics of woke Hollywood being up in arms about how a movie could possibly feature anti-incarceration themes, criticizing the police system and how it can get in the way of rehabilitation and reintegration into society. If we want to be charitable, we can argue that perhaps critics of woke Hollywood are only now realizing that art can and is indeed used as a vessel to explore real-world themes. Maybe Star Wars is only now becoming more obvious in its political messaging. And if the earlier Star Wars had been just as pronounced in their themes, this would have been enough to turn those same people off. Maybe they wouldn't enjoy political messaging in a movie even if the messaging was something they agree with. I mean, since he hates political messaging in cinema so much, let's hear what Ben Shapiro has to say about Sound of Hope, a movie which criticizes the left's supposed agenda to push people into an LGBT lifestyle. Surely he'll complain about the movie being too political, right?
The movie is just terrific. Obviously, Daily Wire is working with Angel Studios to put this in theater.
Oh. Wait, you mean not only does he love this movie, his company literally helped distribute it? I think it's pretty clear by now that critics of the woke Hollywood left aren't critical of messaging in cinema. They're critical of messaging that they disagree with. They're not critical of exclusion, they're critical of their own exclusion. Though it might surprise you to find out that I don't entirely disagree with them. Hollywood does have an agenda beyond just making good entertainment, though it's not the agenda that Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro would have you believe. The agenda really is... it's money. Hollywood's agenda is to make money. Of course, Disney is the company which made a Black Panther film and then masked Black Panther's face in the China poster to appeal to a market that doesn't tend to support black-led films. Disney is the company that cast a black co-lead in The Force Awakens and then edited him out of the Chinese poster. This is the company that included a gay kiss in Star Wars and then cut it out in Singapore. Because it turns out money is all companies care about. It's why Warner Bros. Fired no-name Hartley Sawyer from The Flash over his past tweets, only to then later have Ezra Miller pop up in a cameo on the show, despite the fact that they were on video choking a woman. So I got some advice for Ben Shapiro. The next time you see a transgender influencer pose with a can of Bud Light, try not to get too worked up. They're only doing it because they want to sell beer to trans people, and it's no more complex than that.